The following program is brought to you by Fanbags Cornhole, Chicago's official supplier of professional cornhole boards and bags. Choose from any of their officially licensed designs or have my boy Brian design a custom set using anything from a selfie to your company's logo. Visit www.fanbagscornhole.com and use the promo code BRAGS to get 10% off your entire order. That's www.fanbagscornhole.com and use the promo code BRAGS for 10% off. Step up your game with Fanbags Cornhole.
It's Zach Edey with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
I assume you aren't really able to peek at the Jumbotron too much, but whenever your mom gets up there on the Jumbotron, crowd erupts. Do you think that in Mackey Arena alone, do you think you're a bigger celebrity or her right now?
I don't know. It's tough. People love her. I honestly think she could probably run for mayor and win it at this point.
Oh yeah.
People really love her in Lafayette. I think she has more followers on Twitter than I do right now. So it's just funny. People really love her, but it's cool.
Yeah.
Does she ever talk some smack about that she's got more followers than you, or
a little bit sometimes? She says her Twitter game's good.
And there it is. Yesterday afternoon, had the pleasure of interviewing Zach Edey, potential front runner, at least you can definitely say, for National Player of the Year. Want you to definitely go back and watch that if you haven't already. But I am your host, Greg Braggs Jr. Alongside me, as always, is Craig Bowers here, and this is Boilers in the Stands. And beneath us is a good friend of our show, here. He's been on many times in past years, and he's from Assembly Call, which is a very popular Indiana basketball podcast, and a group that I've looked up to for a long time as far as trying to pull some ideas and things of that nature. And me and Brian have developed somewhat of a friendship here in the last few years, because he also does work with Delphi Bracketology, which basically they use their formula to try to figure out who is going to be in the March Madness dance, and they're pretty damn accurate at it. So, without further ado, this is Coach Tonsoni, for those of you that don't know him already. Welcome back to the show, Coach. How are you?
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to talk basketball. College basketball is so exciting and so fun. The atmosphere in the gyms. You got a couple of teams here that are going to play on Saturday that are playing some good basketball, and it's brackets. It's the NCAA tournament. It's March Madness. So we're just happy to be here and share with you guys some of our thoughts about the Indiana Hoosiers and where they're at going into Saturday, and then spend some time talking brackets. We just had a meeting down here in my man cave with our student committee and did a lot of good work. So we have some information for you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And that's why we wanted to come on, do a little IU Purdue preview and talk some bracketology. I know you guys were enjoying your dinner here tonight and had a good meeting too. So excited to get into it. But let's start out with IU and Purdue. I mean, you guys were nipping at our heels for a minute, and I watched your post-game show, the last couple games for IU, and you kind of called it after the Illinois game that Indiana was starting to work with a little fatigue factor. I was sitting there like, man, these guys won't be denied. They're scratching and clawing out games that they hadn't won in previous years, especially in most recent history. And now all of a sudden they're winning those close ones. And you kind of cautioned fans after the Illinois game over the weekend, like, hey, there's a big fatigue factor setting in. And that's kind of what you saw last night against Michigan State. IU is doing everything they can to compete and have a respectable record here in Big Ten conference play. But now you're starting to see a little bit of that fatigue factor, aren't you?
I think so. You're playing people 39, 40 minutes a game, and I know they're college athletes, but I think that takes a toll over the course of a season. And I think Indiana had to, with the injuries they had early. They lost 3 games in a row and were 1-4 in the Big Ten, and it was, you better turn it around now, or you're going to have a year where you're not going to the tournament. And they've done that. But it's required Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson-Davis from playing a lot of basketball,
right?
And they've been able to scrap. I think this team is very scrappy. I mean, they keep fighting. They keep coming back from adverse moments. Sometimes it's not enough, like Tuesday night. But, yes, you have to be concerned that the minutes that these guys are playing, because of the lack of depth, injury-wise, and some of the bench players haven't panned out like everyone thought they would be, that's going to play a role going down the end of the year. So hopefully they can find a way to rest up mentally and physically and play some good basketball down the stretch.
100%. Craig, what do you got for our guy here?
Yeah, Brian. Things that is just different stuff from home away. And statistic is you look at them team.
Is he breaking up for you, Brian?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time hearing the question.
Yeah, Craig, you're a little frozen on that end. On our end, you're just looking down and you're froze. and maybe he's back. Yeah, something's with your Wi-Fi, Craig. Why don't you jump out and jump back in? You're fine. So I don't know. Maybe you should completely log out, Craig. There you go. He's doing that. So got some Wi-Fi issues. I saw somebody saying that there was technical difficulties during the intro, so I certainly hope that wasn't the case. Everything looked good on my end, but that's kind of what you have to work. You're at the mercy of your Wi-Fi sometimes, aren't you,
exactly.
Brian?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, for me, Trace Jackson-Davis is somebody that, admittedly, I never had a lot of respect for. I have to admit it. I just have to put it bluntly. The last few years, I always thought I didn't love his attitude. I mean, he's always been talented. Sometimes I felt it was somewhat overhyped because he's one-dimensional, and I never really liked how, you know, you look at him and you think like, man, where's that 18-foot jumper? You know, like if he could just expand outside of the paint a little bit. You know, with Edey, he's 7'4", so you get it, right? You know, people want him to shoot threes. That's not going to happen. But like with Trace, you're like, man, you know, the last few years, I'd be like, man, you just wish he could pull a guy out from the paint and knock down a jump shot every once in a while, make him that much more effective. And then on top of it, sometimes I had issue with his attitude. I felt like when they were up, he had the right attitude. And then when they were down, it was the opposite. And this year, he's completely won me over. His attitude is, I don't know if it's better or maybe I was just being way too biased and getting too deep into this rivalry and not liking him for the wrong reasons. But like, there's just so many examples. I mean, last night, you know, wearing the Spartan Strong shirt to start, obviously that's, I have a lot of respect for somebody that's going to do something like that. I mean, I think any player would, but he did it and not everyone did. So you give him a big tip of the cap there. And, you know, on top of that, he called, Coach Painter, you know, when Caleb Swanigan, you know, had passed away and Painter revealed that after the game, you know, at IU. And just on top of that, in general, like I saw his interaction with Coleman Hawkins after the Illinois game saying, like, you shouldn't have got that tech, dude. Keep playing hard. And, you know, I think he has grown up a lot, but maybe I think some of my issues with him were maybe unfounded. What is your observations? Yeah. And then ultimately on the court, you know, while I always said, he's so one-dimensional. Well, like Zach Edey, he's pretty damn good at that one dimension. He dominates you. And now all of a sudden, like, he's passing as good as any big man I've seen in a long time. What are your observations just as in the totality with Trayce Jackson-Davis, with his attitude and his play?
Well, it's obvious when we look at this rivalry, we see things a lot differently. You know, that's just what the rivalry's supposed to be, right? That's what makes it an awesome thing. But there was some truth to what you said. We felt all along that at times if Trayce would get in foul trouble and he had to sit for a little while, he had trouble getting back into games. And there was a little bit of an up and down in his play at times in his previous year. And you're absolutely correct. He's having a tremendous season. Like any of their concerns, he has been good for 3 years, really good for 3 years. But there were little bits of wonder. Was he, you know, everything that he could be? Well, he's doing that this year. And even though he's not shooting jumpers and stretching the floor like you would want your 4-man or 5-man to do traditionally or in modern basketball, he has changed his game. He's being able to move to both sides. He's making decisions quicker. And you mentioned his passing. Like, he is an elite passer for anyone, let alone a post player. And so they're putting a lot of weight on their season on him. And I just think he's been a good leader. You've mentioned some of the off-the-court things. You see it in huddles. And when you're running a program, Greg, you want your best player to be your hardest worker, and you want him to be on that even keel mentally. And I think Trayce Jackson-Davis is doing a lot of those things really, really well. And they've done a good job. I think Indiana's better, actually, when they put him on the move and get him some elbow catches and don't just put him back to the basket. I think they utilize him better this year, but he has been tremendous rebounding. He's been tremendous blocking shots. He's been, you know, sharing. Last night he didn't play well, and he still had led the team in assists with 5 assists. So, yes, I think he's corrected some of those pockets of time where he might have, you know, let the results of a game get to him a little bit, and it's just been consistent effort. And the concern to your opening remarks then is, how many times can he do that 39, 40 minutes in a row? Yeah,
it was incredible.
You know, we see a lot of
watch
load management in the NBA.
Well, you watch that Michigan game. He played every single minute of that whole game, and they come out with the win. And that's when I tweeted, to much of the chagrin of Boiler Nation, on Twitter, and I just was being honest with my personal honesty. Maybe it was a bad take at the time, and Zach kind of helped extend the gap on Sunday against Ohio State, but I was like, hey guys, Trayce Jackson-Davis is coming for Zach Edey's National Player of the Year award. And I think some Purdue fans pushed back on that violently. Some rolled their eyes at it, but it was just my personal assessment because I'm looking at it like, hey, they're the best players on each team. They're clearly like the 2 best players in the country, in my opinion. Maybe that Big Ten bias is coming out. But then also, what if IU had caught Purdue, still could technically catch Purdue for a share of the Big Ten title or even to win it outright? Now, all of a sudden, you're getting into this muddy water of, yeah, Zach's been more consistent all year, but Trace Jackson-Davis comes on like his hair's on fire for the last 2 months, and it just putting up unbelievable numbers where he's putting up triple doubles, 40 minutes a game. And I'm like, hey, this race ain't over. And people were like, well, that's not what Vegas is saying. I'm like, that's just what my eyes are telling me. So, I think that's just a credit to Trace Jackson-Davis. I think he's been incredible. No, my Hoosier takes aren't coming out icy, Mike. I'm just trying to be fair and give a fair assessment to the landscape. Welcome back, Craig. Your internet issues have been solved.
I have no idea what's going on. I've been plugged in the whole time. It's just over in Delphi, right? He probably understands rural internet can be a real pain in the butt sometimes. So
it's not fun. It's not fun.
No, not at all. And I think that argument kind of ended when IU got faded out of having a chance to come back and win the Big Ten.
Right.
Had Trace led them back to winning the Big Ten, then I think an argument possibly could have been made. Just don't think with the body work that Zach put together in November and December that there's enough room for TJD to catch him at this point. Unless he had done something miraculous, like single-handedly led IU all the way back to winning the Big Ten, personally. I could be wrong. He's like favored. I don't know. I don't understand gambling, Braggs. That's your deal. But Zach is still really, really heavily favored on the gambling odds right now. So I'd say it's a slim chance.
I mean, I think they go off of obviously Zach Edey's the prohibitive favorite, but it's also about where the money's going too, right, Brian? I mean, I'm certainly no gambling expert either. I'm on a gambling show, and when we do the gambling segment, they leave me out of that part because I'm still getting my feet wet when it comes to using DraftKings, who's sponsored by CHGO. There's a shameless plug. But, I also think it's about where the money's going so that they can they set it so they can encourage people to bet certain things. So,
it's also Zach set the tone early. Like he was dominant early in some really big wins. When Indiana was losing to Arizona and Kansas, Purdue was beating Duke and Gonzaga out in Portland, and that gets set in the minds of the voters. And again, I think Zach Edey's going to get it and probably should get it, and he's been real consistent in his play. And Trace has just really come on. He had a good year all year, don't get me wrong, but Indiana hasn't won. And Craig, I think you're right. I like it when winning matters. I'm not a big guy that says you can be MVP of a league and your team finishes 6th, in a league. I believe winning matters, and if you're a dominant player on a winning team, I think that takes nothing away from what Trace Jackson-Davis is doing. He's having an incredible year, but if you're talking about player of the year, only one person can get it. There's a heck of a lot of good players in college basketball, and both of these young men are going to be fun to watch on Saturday and fun to watch in March because I think they do things traditionally back to the basket, at the rim, in a game of where the three-point line and the dribble drive has taken over. These are two guys who are getting it done in a traditional place. And so for an old guy like me, that's kind of fun to watch at times.
And they're both going to be unanimous All-Americans.
Right.
That's going to happen. So, I mean, obviously both extremely talented and played well all year.
And is there any chance that, because some people suggest that maybe Trace Jackson-Davis wins Big Ten Player of the Year? I have a hard time believing. Like, to me, whoever wins National Player of the Year from the Big Ten should also be winning Big Ten Player of the Year. Do you think there's any chance of that going the opposite way?
No. I mean, if you're National Player of the Year, you should win your Conference Player of the Year. I guess you could make the argument that in conference games, if let's say Zach had a really good non-conference and then Trace was better than him in conference, if you're just looking at conference, if that's your criteria, maybe that would happen. But, if you're the best player in the country, how can you not be your best player in your conference?
Slow down here, Brian. We got Steve Preo saying you called Purdue fans a bunch of whiny asses on assembly call. Is this
I'm not
true?
backing. This is true because I live in Delphi, 20 minutes away, and
you're in the lion's den now.
I am.
Chat.
And I apologize. Don't apologize for the red and white in the background. Greg will know that I have a lot of respect for Coach Painter and the Purdue basketball program. But the people that I work with who are Purdue fans, they were whiny asses on the Monday after Indiana won. Now, I didn't help much because I wore my candy stripes to school. But I've had every time I've been told I have a stain on my shirt, I thought I'd wear the candy stripes back in on Monday with a little bit of flair, and they were all over me. So, glad to see some of your fans tune into our show.
That's what I was saying. I mean, I've definitely been watching your show, A, to get pointers, but B, I enjoy the conversation, and I think we all are, while we're fans of our own teams, we're fans of the Big Ten, and you guys, I think, are the standard as far as, in my opinion, basketball podcasts and even sports podcasts. I'm not blowing smoke. I think assembly calls.
I thought you were going a different direction there for a second.
No, I think
Greg.
they are.
I'm glad you clarified that you were talking about Brian and podcasts. So
no, I honestly feel like the guys at assembly call are the standard. That's a standard I want to live by far as what we do here at this show. They are that good at what they do. And a lot of what you see here is from ideas that I've been secretly pulling for 3 years. And Jared, actually reached out to me after Purdue lost to IU, and I'd never had any interaction with him. He DM'd me through the assembly call account and said, "Hey, tuned in to hear the other side's opinion. You guys did a great job." I actually, it was funny because I think we were both saying some of the same things, and you guys had some interesting things that I might use for our show. And that's when I revealed to him, like, yeah, I've been watching you. Well, first I'm assuming this isn't Coach Tonsoni because it just was the assembly call account. But it's just funny how I think both of us are, and the fans are tuning into the other side to see what the reaction is and the narrative is. Because, we get caught up in that as fan bases, especially on Twitter and things of that nature. So, we're watching you, Brian, and whatever.
Well, I won't lie. I am a man of my words. I did say that, and I kind of meant it for the fans who interacted with me.
Well, I mean,
but that's okay. That's what the rivalry is all about. Like, those people I work with are good friends of mine, and they give it to me, and I give it back, and then we go out and have a beer and a pizza, right?
Well,
it's not Bears Packers. Like, I don't like Packer fans, right? So
I will say a few weeks ago, I tuned into the show and listened right before IU went on this big winning streak. And I forget who they lost to, but there were some people on your show that were hot and the comments were hot.
Yeah.
So
the chat room
both ways.
Yeah. The chat room can get to be interesting at times with our live chat. And we hope to provide a spot for people to vent after losses and celebrate after wins. And, we've actually gone to, as hosts, not reading it during the show. We used to read it during the show and try to comment, and we've gone away because it's moving too fast. And then if someone says something and it gets your juices flowing, then it kind of gets into the vibe of the show. But we have a good following. It's a lot of fun. And Icy Mike says there, on our side, we haven't been much of a rivalry for you guys, and now these last 2 years, it's been close games, and I expect another good battle. I expect Purdue to win on Saturday, to be honest. I just think that's how it goes in this rivalry, and both teams are really good. They protect home court. But it's fun having teams that are good again as opposed to, on our side, we were on the bottom end. I guess you guys would rather have it that way.
100%. It was, Purdue won 9 in a row at one point?
They won 9 in a row.
They almost got the Mortal Kombat where they won 10 in a row, and that would open up some kind of portal where the demons would come through or something. And you guys ended that last year with the where you guys stormed the court and everything. Well, that's where I want to talk about it. It's like how much this rivalry kind of has turned back into one. And like Coach Woodson, I think some people had some questions early on, and now I'm seeing a guy that you're starting to see is his coaching prowess. How much have you seen, Coach Woodson evolve into becoming, a solid coach for Indiana basketball?
I think he's gotten better this year than it was his first year, and I think no matter how many years you're in the pro league, when you come down to a college league, you have to adjust to college basketball. And I think he's still in the process of doing that. And if you tune into our show, you'll hear some nights that, we question what we do. We definitely do run a very pro type of system, both offensively and defensively. And you need talent in order to run that. And that's why Indiana's won, because Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson-Davis are very, very talented, and they're able to play the isolation games, the post feeds, the ball screen game. And they're able to do that. And when they do that well, Indiana is very, very, very tough to play against. So I give credit to Woodson for that. We had a comment the other day where I really learned a lesson, guys, about coaches are really general managers, where they acquire talent, they manage talent, they motivate talent. And we always go on the postgame show and talk about, well, they didn't screen here, or they didn't use this press or whatever, the X's and O's, and that's just a part of running. I think Coach Woodson's an excellent GM in getting the program back to where the fans are more connected. It's about Indiana again. I think sometimes during the games there's still some things that I think collegiately he can do a little bit different in calling some actions on offense. Some of the defenses are more pro in nature, in my opinion, and I think that's just a growth process. But all the other stuff, he's done a fantastic job in getting Indiana back after, 15 years of kind of just up and down and struggle to get back to where everyone thinks Indiana should be. But, yes, I think he's doing a really good job. Indiana's in a better place, and yet there's still room for the program to get better.
All right. That 9-game win streak that you talked about, Braggs, the last time either side won 9 games or more, you have to go all the way back to 1949 to 1955 when IU won 13 in a row. So putting that into some historical perspective, like that just doesn't happen often in this rivalry. And I'm one too who has said, like, I want this to be a rivalry. I think the Big Ten's better when IU and Purdue are both good. I think the feel of basketball just in Indiana as college fans is better when they're both good, and the games both mean something for both teams that are in it all the way through. One thing that I've noticed, throughout the year, and it's been documented to some degree, is just the split for IU at home versus IU away. Whether we're looking at just scoring efficiency in terms of like 3-point percentage, with IU shooting 42% from home, 33% away. If we look at, Jordan Hood-Schifino, just in his numbers, in terms of efficiency, shooting 53% from, in field goal percentage and twos at home versus 33% away. I guess, have you seen anything that makes you think IU's turning a corner in terms of that home away split, or is this still an issue?
I think it's still an issue. They won at Xavier, and Xavier's having a nice season. That was early. They won at Illinois, which was somewhat of a surprise. But, going to Vegas and playing Arizona, going to Kansas and playing Kansas, they did not play very well. And even though they won a game at Michigan and battled to Northwestern, they do not play as well on the road. And some of that, I think we have to look at. A lot of teams don't play well. Purdue has done a nice job on the road for the most part this year, just up until recently. But I think that shows, too, that there's good coaches and good programs in the Big Ten. And I get a little tired of everyone saying the Big Ten, because they haven't won for a long time, is not one of those elite conferences. But it is just a brutal stretch of basketball to play on the road. So I give credit a lot to that atmosphere. But, yeah, Indiana needs to figure that out. And going into Saturday's game, that's a major concern. But you have guys like Galloway who plays better at home. And it's just, man, if we could bottle that and sell it, we all be very rich in Miller Kopp. And so the one consistent.
He's the new
Trace
guy
Jackson
that I
Davis,
hate.
Right?
He's the new guy when I watch the games. I love to hate on is Miller Kopp. I've directed my angst towards him. Anytime he hits a shot, I'm like, you're lucky. Even though he's a very good shooter, I still like to.
Well, they should run some more actions for him, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, when he gets going, he's one of those guys that I think is a difference maker for your team. When he gets those 12 points, that's the separator. And when he gets 3,
that's been the point of contention with a lot of us on the show too. Is you have a couple players who are shooting over 40% from three, and there's not a lot of actions run for them. One of the things about Coach Painter is when Mason Gillis got hot, I think they ran some things for Mason Gillis in the game. He got 9. Those are the things that are somewhat confusing. You obviously 3-point shooting is important for Purdue. When you shoot well, you're unstoppable. And that's Mr. Obvious, I guess, for any basketball team. But if you guys hit threes, like how are you going to guard Purdue? If you're taking care of the basketball, hitting threes, when you do that, it's a dominant performance. But Indiana has some guys who can shoot the three, but how many shots do they take from three? Are their actions run? And threes are daggers on the road, at home. They're very important shots, even though you have Edey and we have Trace Jackson Davis, and they're high efficiency players. You need some shots to go in, and that's been a point of contention for us too. That we need some threes and some actions for some threes.
Yeah, Joe Jackson, one of our X's and O's analytical guys, he says I can't recall many pin downs for Kyle
1,000%. How about the triple floppy action you guys run? You run that zoom action with Edey to the handoff, and then it sets up the triple action floppy, what we call floppy, the screen underneath the basket. That's an example of that. That might end up in Zach Edey in the post. But it also gives an option for a handoff with your freshman guards being able to go downhill. And then if not, then you got a guy coming off those screens on the baseline that you can kick out for a three. So you have many options within what is being run. To me, that's college basketball. That's not what you tune in when you tune into the NBA and you see Luka sit there and everyone else spaces and Luka crab dribbles for 75 seconds and then he kicks it out and it rotates and they jump over someone and hit a three. That's NBA. So I catch a lot of grief because of how much I enjoy what Purdue does offensively, and when I talk about it on the show, everyone accuses me of liking Purdue and liking Illinois and all this. I like good I just like good basketball.
Right.
Do I want Indiana to win every game, and do I want them to beat Purdue every game? Yes, but I will tell you, Purdue cuts hard, Purdue screens, Purdue runs good stuff, and the reason that it hasn't been a rivalry, Craig, is because you've been consistent with your coaching. Yeah, Gene Cady. And now you got Matt Painter. And Matt Painter is one of the top coaches in the country. And I know some Purdue fans get mad when you go on a losing streak and maybe not, if you don't win in the tournament because of matchups or a bad game. But that dude can flat out coach. And I think this year really shows it when everyone expected them to be middle of the pack and they're going to be a number 1 seed. I think that's just some really good stuff.
Yeah. Is some of that IU how do I want to put this? I there were some times where I thought IU fired some pretty good coaches chasing a great coach and has realized maybe that's a little harder to grab, that unicorn great coach, Bill Self-like coach out there in the world. They're few and far between, and it seems like, I mean, I don't know. From the outside, it seems like IU's had a little bit harder time attracting that coach in the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, the guy who followed your legend has done a really great job. The guys following our legend have not done a very good job. And then, to your point, have we been too quick to try to go to the next direction? And I think the correct answer has to be yes at some times. And so now you have – the best coach we had in there made some phone calls and text, and now has the number 1 team in the land in Houston. I mean, if he doesn't, and part of it's on him, and our fan base doesn't like him, and I catch grief for liking Kelvin Sampson too, but the guy can coach. Right. I wish he would have just paid attention to the rules as they were back then. Yeah, you could do that now, right?
Right.
Because if Kelvin Sampson had been at Indiana since then, that would have been really, really good stuff. He wasn't very good when he was here, though, to be honest. But, man, has he turned it around down there. But then Crean was good, but he kind of wore out his welcome. I loved Archie, but Archie it was too big of a school for Archie and his personality. And now you've just started churning coaches while you guys have had one guy. And then he recruits to the system. And you better play for the name on the front, not on the name on the back. And that's why you guys win basketball games. And I'm being as honest as I can. Whiny ass or not, you guys have a good program. And that's something that Woodson needs to do.
Yeah, and Matt went through 2 really bad years in that stretch, right. and they let it ride. They rode with him through that. And I think just looking at programs around the country, sometimes they're too quick to 1 year, okay, 2 years, you're gone, just boom, you know. And even if you look at like the NFL, I'll take it to Braggs here. You look at the Steelers, right? Consistency breeds success, and I think programs, pro and college, are too quick sometimes. Like if you believed in that guy, believe in him. Let him have a couple years to work through that sometimes.
Yeah. So now going into this game here on Saturday, and some of the things Purdue can do well or try to, what stood out to me here these last 2 games at IU is you guys just blitzkrieg us here in the first half, and at IU, there's just this wave of emotion that Purdue has to overcome, and it's tough to kind of gain your bearings in that kind of hostile environment. Well, the last home game for Purdue, all of a sudden now Mackey Arena is becoming somewhat hostile because the refs, are starting to become a point of contention for Boilers fans and Big Ten fans kind of across the board. I think a lot of fans, even IU fans, had it up to here when they left Northwestern and Boo Booey pushes off and they didn't get a call on that. And so now I look into this game at Mackey because, like I said, on Sunday against Ohio State, it was very funny to watch how the fans were very intensely just draped all over the refs to make sure they got the right call. And when they didn't, even the most minute thing like a push off on a post up, they're letting the refs have it before the whistle even comes out. They're basically trying to make the call for them, which is something I see that happens at Assembly Hall a lot, especially when Purdue is there. How much do you think that Indiana will be able to try to blitzkrieg with that ball pressure they do without getting into foul trouble at Mackey Arena with this kind of hovering over Purdue's fan base where when they come to now, when the refs are coming to Mackey Arena, they can't make too many mistakes before it turns pretty hostile?
Well, the officiating is not as bad as everyone thinks it is. And this is coming from a high school coach who can't stand officials. But these guys are still good at what they do. It's just that we're so locked into every call as fans. And I hope that the officials call it fair no matter where the game's played. I do think your atmosphere is tougher on the players. But you brought I think the key to the game Saturday is, can Purdue handle the pressure that Indiana's going to put on the guards? And can Indiana play that pressure defense without fouling and getting foul trouble? Indiana was up 9. Hood Schifino gets 2 fouls Saturday, sits for 6 minutes, and it's a 25-7 run without Hood Schifino. And since Xavier Johnson is not available, and I assume he's not going to be available Saturday, he might be back soon, but you don't have that real great second ball handler, and I thought that cost Indiana. So playing good, solid defense, you need to get into the Purdue guards. And I think you guys have seen that the turnovers recently and the different types of pressure. Ohio State tried to deny Braden Smith the ball and not let him catch it to disrupt the offense. That worked for about, 6 minutes? I think that's the secret to trying to beat Purdue, is to really, really pressure the heck out of the guards and make then the pass ahead and quick passes before they can get it into Edey. There's multiple ways to guard a big man, but some of it is to make it hectic before the ball even goes in there. And I think Indiana, in the 3 games that they have played Purdue under Mike Woodson, have achieved that, winning 2 close ones and losing a close one. And so I think you'll see more of that. But if there's a lot of foul calls, then that's going to benefit Purdue. Because the depth right now for Indiana is not as solid as it has been, and they rely on their starters. And again, if they can't play that because they got to adapt to the officials, then that gives the guards the ability to handle that. But I also expect Purdue's guards to be better prepared for that than maybe they were when they got blitzed in Assembly Hall.
Well, what do you think that is? I mean, because it's just such different contrast. Purdue goes to Maryland and loses, and there wasn't a foul called against Maryland for the first 15 minutes of the game. I mean, that's pretty astounding when you consider how physical Big Ten play is, for a team to not be called for a foul for the first 15 minutes. And then in the second half, they didn't get called in the first 8 or 9 minutes of the second half. And that's like 20, 23, 24 minutes of calls where they were not made against any player on Maryland. But then they go to play Ohio State at home, and they shot like 50 free throws. And for me, it's like, where is the consistency with the officiating? Because at the end of the day, like you said, we all just want the game to be called straight.
The team that plays better gets the benefits of the calls. So if Maryland's playing better at home, they're not going to foul as much probably. I think I think it's not as simple as officials call for the home team. I would hope not. If that's the case, then I think the integrity of the game is ruined. I think it has more to do with, are you a step slow on the road? Are you tired on the road? Something out there, and I don't have the exact answer. I don't know. There are some questionable calls, a lot of questionable calls. And with replay and high-definition television now, we see it a heck of a lot more. And the replay has kind of played into that as well, because now everything can be replayed either on TV or an official replay. And, we expect the officials to be 1,000% perfect when our guards throw the ball away, our post-player travels, those things. So I honestly, Greg, I think the officiating is okay. It's not good, but it's not as bad as everyone thinks it is. And if it was one-sided for the home team, then I think the league's got a huge problem. I think it just looks that way because we're so passionate about the game, and to be honest.
It's easier to pick on the refs than blame.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which I'm happy to do.
One of the things that you brought up with the turnovers and just the physicality that IU played Purdue's guards, and I think obviously it's shown in several games where that's really disrupted the flow of Purdue's offense, not let them get into their stuff. And it's obviously the equation to try to take Edey out of it, not necessarily how you guard Edey, but how you guard the guards on those entry passes and whatnot. With that said, when we look at turnovers at Purdue's season, they've won a lot of games where they had 15, 16, 17, 18 turnovers. And they did so because they had a plus 10, plus 12 rebound margin and a sizable free throw margin. At IU, I think we were only +1 at the line, and I want to say rebounding was within 2 or 3. Is that something you can see IU replicating in terms of matching Purdue rebounding?
Man, it's hard because you got two really nice big pieces there. With First and Edey, like, it's hard to block Edey out because he just reaches up and grabs stuff. Like, he's a great offensive rebounder. You really and so if you're guarding him with your best rebounder, I think the best way to keep Edey off the boards is just to block him out, face guard him, and take him into the bleachers if you don't get called for a foul. But if you're blocking Edey out, you can't be a rebounder. You got to let everyone else clean up the rebound. But the trouble is you're usually guarding him with your best rebounder. So that becomes an issue. But that's been a strength of Purdue, and I think First does a nice job too. Again, I'm not as well versed with your team, but I'm big on guard rebounding. If Indiana's going to win the game, Hood Schifino, Kopp's not a great rebounder from the small forward position, but those guards got to go in and attack the ball when it gets to Edey's hands or First hands and try to get that ball, tap it away from him as much as possible. Because if you hold Purdue to some shooting issues, but they're getting rebounds and scoring off them, that's why Purdue has been very successful. So it's got to be a team rebounding effort for Indiana or anyone who's playing your Purdue Boilermakers to really crack down on Edey and just keep him from, away from the ball as much as possible. But, man, that's a tall task. I don't mean to throw
now,
that out
Painter,
there,
after one of the games where a team tried to do that, basically face guard Edey on the rebounds, I saw Painter afterwards say that was illegal. That
it probably is, but I would try it if I was the opposing coach.
Right. Well, and that was said on.
Hell, you got the guy is just having a great year. You just got to. It is a foul if you extend your hands, but I would tell my guy to get like an offensive tackle and just walk him,
right,
and dare them to make every call on that because he's just massive. Not only is he skilled and he's 7'4", but he's athletic and he's got great timing. So you got to disrupt the timing. And that's where you attack his hands on catches. You attack the dribble on doubles. You track when he bounces it. You try to go after his hands. if you can. And then on rebounds, you got to go over his lower body and try to push him a step or two away where he can't get that. I don't know that that's easily done.
Right, because Joe Jackson's in our chat, and he says Edey is number 1 in offensive rebound percentage, and first is like 40th in the country. So you're dealing with 2 of the best in the country, in the same lineup. So, they certainly – and I agree with you. Like, the other teams are just going to dare the refs to call it. You heard even – I think it was Sam Bardo on the Northwestern game broadcast saying, they were showing how much they were fouling Zach before the rebound, and he's like, well, I don't blame them. What else are you going to do? You got to dare the officials to call it. So let's try to wrap a bow here on kind of the IU Purdue discussion. I mean, we could talk about previewing this game for another hour, I'm sure, but it's getting late for both of you. I mean, it's almost 10 o'clock at night here, so it's almost 11 o'clock at night for you two. And I do want to get into some bracketology talk, but, Brian, when you look at this game on Saturday, what is your observations? I know you think that Purdue's going to win. So kind of what are your observations heading into this game?
Well, my interest is, one, I obviously want Indiana to win. I'd like for it to be a very close game, and Indiana's going to have to guard without fouling and find a way to beat the double team like they did in the first half. I think Purdue had their way in the second half. So whoever dominates their half a little bit more. Purdue won the second half at Assembly Hall, just came up a little bit short, made the appropriate adjustments at halftime. But Purdue likes to double, and they like to double big on big, and they do a really good job on the backside of tagging the backside and then closing out of it. If Purdue can guard all of that, I think that's going to give Indiana some trouble, because Indiana struggled here just a little bit recently with if you're doubling, if you're not doubling, and some turnovers out of the double. And that's just, Matt Painter is a man, he does what he does. He doubled, I think, guards in there when Pickett was in there. He doubles, and that's just his philosophy, and he's going to continue to do that. They have to execute that well. And in Indiana, I think the key has been brought up. They got to guard without fouling in order to stop Purdue. I think Purdue ekes out a close game, because I think they're just going to be motivated to right the ship from a few of their losses. They're home. The home atmosphere at Mackey is absolutely incredible. It's worth at least 5 points, I believe. The betting angle is 3 points or 2 points in basketball. I think at Mackey it's even more. So I think that adds up to a tough afternoon for Indiana. Do I think Indiana has a chance? Yes, they've proven it with the way they played at Mackey last year. They've proved it with winning 9 out of 12 that they can compete in the Big Ten. So I think there's a chance for Indiana, but they're going to have to play a lot better than they have in the last 3 games in order to win on the road and then on the road at Mackey.
And I think that the pressure kind of got turned down a bit for Purdue with that win against Ohio State. That was much needed for them. Had they lost that game somehow and IU had won against Michigan State, all the pressure would have been on Purdue on Saturday night. It's going to be a build-up. It's a night game on the Fox, a Saturday primetime hoops thing. So there will be a buildup of anticipation as opposed to playing at, 11:30 in the morning.
I think you guys can clinch the Big Ten too. If Northwestern loses,
exactly.
Northwestern loses and then you beat Indiana, all the magic numbers are gone. I think that clinches it.
Yeah. The only thing that would,
what a great way to beat your rival.
The only thing that would remain is because the magic number is 3 for Northwestern.
Oh, 3. Okay.
So, but to share a Big Ten title, it's 2.
That's it.
To win it outright, it's 3. So if Northwestern loses tomorrow night to Illinois at Illinois, Purdue has a chance to eliminate IU from any kind of aspirations to win to share a Big Ten, and B, clinch a share of the Big Ten with Northwestern. So it'd be interesting to see if that scenario comes to play. Will Purdue celebrate? Because last year, Wisconsin, when they won clinched their share of the Big Ten title against Purdue at Wisconsin in a last minute dramatic win, they brought the stage and podium out and brought Barstool Big Cat out there, and they celebrated as if they had won the Big Ten outright. And then they lost to Nebraska a couple days later, and Illinois snuck in the back door and shared that Big Ten title with them. So I'm curious to see if that scenario plays out if Purdue is willing to like let the confetti fly and bring out the Big Ten trophy and celebrate that with the Mackey Arena fans, I selfishly want them to just to enjoy that moment. But you're not clinching it outright. You're only clinching a share of it, and you still have work to be done. And we saw how that came back to bite Wisconsin. So it'll be interesting to see if that scenario comes and how Purdue would approach that. But things have to happen. A, Northwestern has to lose, and B, Purdue has to take care of business and win. Craig, real quick, Edey, what are your observations as far as like how you look into going into Saturday against Indiana?
I thought we switched to bracketology. I was
No,
going to
we're
give my
going
bracketology
to, but I
expertise.
figured I'd give, like we gave the IU side of it, and we'll give you the side of it, and then we will transition to bracketology quickly.
I mean, it's pretty simple. We have to limit turnovers. We have to control the boards, and we need to win the free throw board advantage. And typically at home, Purdue has done that with relative ease in terms of winning the free throw margin. I think it's really important. There was a few games in a row there, I think Northwestern too, where we just didn't dominate the boards. And I think, just watching those games, it just looked like we lost the fight down low. It looks like people came with more physicality than us. It certainly looked like we righted that ship against Ohio State, but Ohio State's been really struggling. So I think against IU, it's going to be really important that we win that fight down low, not just with Zach, but our foremen are so good on the boards. When we have sizable margins, they've got to win that fight down low too. Our guards got to rebound, have to win the offensive rebounding margin in general. And then obviously limit turnovers. But, even if we're in that 14, 15, 16 margin, if we win at the other two things, we've proven time and again, if we have a sizable rebound margin, sizable free throw margin, we can certainly still win the game as far as that goes. 7:30 build up, man, that's kind of tough for me. I'm glad we're doing the little social event. Can we announce that, Greg, that we're doing
for it? I don't care.
Yeah. I have confirmed with brokerage, so we're doing a little Purdue Twitter, kind of like people of Purdue Twitter get together at Brokerage Brewing Company before the game on Saturday, and other people are invited to come out and join in on that as well. We've got a room reserved, so if you want to come and meet the world famous Greg Braggs Saturday,
yeah, right. I don't know about all that.
You can come and do that. Now, I'm going to switch just a minute here to bracketology with you, Brian. As I look from the outside, and we saw Virginia get spanked by Boston College, and I've been calling Virginia and Tennessee both frauds for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe longer. I think they've both been frauds for a long time that have just barely been riding by. Man, that next wave, you get past UCLA, and that next wave that's truly vying for a number one seed in the tournament is a really small pool. And I still struggle to see how that committee, as bad as the Pac-12 is, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Gary Parrish called him a mid-major plus today on his podcast. As bad as the Pac-12 is, even if Purdue goes 2-1 down this stretch, I still have a hard time seeing UCLA or Arizona jumping in front of them for a 1 seed. Do you think these top four, as long as they don't burst into flames and lose their next 3 or something crazy like this, are relatively locked in with Kansas, Houston, Purdue, and Bama?
Yeah, I do. I think they're solid teams. The thing in Purdue's benefit is you have 3 Big 12 teams that are going. I don't know if they play each other down the stretch, but nonetheless, they got to play other Big 12 teams, so they're more likely to take a loss than I think Purdue is going to take multiple losses. And so you have Baylor and Texas and Kansas that are in consideration for a 1 seed line, and then, like you said, Arizona has 5 quad 1A wins. I still think that they have an outside chance. I don't think UCLA can get a 1. So I would say there are 7 teams for those 4 spots. And I think Purdue, nothing's ever locked because a lot can happen. But Purdue's in a pretty good spot. I mean, They have the second most wins in quad one on that line. Kansas has 14. Purdue has 9. Alabama has 7. Your concern really is probably, Texas at 6, 10-6 in quad one and no losses out. That's the team I think that probably could jump up and grab a Purdue, and they could have Kansas and Texas on the one line if Purdue were to lose. I think, to be honest with you, that's probably the team I would fear the most in your case of maybe passing Purdue.
Yeah, and Texas and Kansas still have to play each other yet this year.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about is the one thing, guys, too, that I've learned since I've done this is a lot of bracketologists still do it, and a lot of fans, one loss means you need to move down a seed line. It's the body of work, and Purdue has a great body of work with those 9 quad one wins. A loss, even a loss Saturday or something like that, is not going to blow up their resume. I did see, I think you guys, Greg, you might have tweeted out, do you want the 1 seed in the East or wherever? Do you want that 2 seed in Louisville, right?
Right. What would you, if you were a Boiler fan, what would you
take
prefer?
the 1 seed.
Yeah.
You take the one. I think you take the 1 seed.
Easiest path.
Well, somebody broke down the numbers over the last 40 years or whatever, the amount of 1 seeds that made it to the Final Four were against 2 seeds that have made it to the Final Four, and it was double, obviously with 1 seeds because the path is just a little easier.
The Sweet 16 is where you want that 1 seed because you got 4 or 5 likely at maybe an upset there, but a lot of times 12 beats the 5 and then the 12 beats the 4 and you get to 12, and now you're in a 1-game situation. You're playing in that Elite 8 where if you're a 2 seed, that 3 seed line could be a little bit tougher. I mean, they're all going to be tough once you get past the first round. 8 seeds are going to be tough because they're the top 32 teams in the country.
Purdue couldn't have had a better way of it laying out for them last year. And it didn't work out for them. So
take the 1 seed.
Marquette keeps on getting better and better for us. That win way back in November, all of a sudden it looks like they're going to just stroll home to a Big East championship here. And I don't know if they're projected at a 2 seed or a 3 seed right now, but when you start comparing that margin there, and I don't think anybody other than Big 12 teams, when it comes around to that time, is going to have the body of work between Gonzaga, Duke, Marquette outside a conference of teams that are going to be highly seeded in the tournament.
Yeah, I don't see how Purdue's got to lose 2 or 3 games. I think before they're in jeopardy, and I wouldn't worry about the conference tournament either. A lot of the results are already set in stone before the conference tournament. So if there's a crazy result early on a Friday, in that first round that Purdue's going to play in, don't panic. I think that's already been set in stone by that stage. They're either a 1 or a 2 by that time anyway.
Now, for you as an IU fan, I heard you mention that you said you wouldn't mind if IU lost their first game of the Big Ten tournament because of the fatigue factor that's going on with them. So that's the would you rather I want to pose to you. Would you rather them win the Big Ten tournament and move up to a 4 or maybe even a 3 seed? Because I know when they came out with the early bracket here, they had them as a 4 seed and the top 4 seed. So if they were to win the Big Ten tournament, that might elevate them even higher where their road could be a little easier. Or would you rather they just lose early in the Big Ten tournament and rest up for it?
Well, and here's the interesting thing. I don't think it matters if you win the Big Ten tournament for your seeding. That's already done. The game's played at 3. The game's played at 3 o'clock on Sunday. The seeding's already done.
Wrap it up, yeah.
And CBS has the bracket. There could be some contingencies at that point, but it's a catch-22. Winning the Big Ten tournament's good for the program because you get recruits and everyone's happy. You win a championship. But, man, that's brutal. If you play Thursday after a gauntlet of 3 games, if you get the double bye and you play 3 games and then you get a Thursday opening night, and you're probably going to win that because you're a better seed. But that's a lot of games. And really, for my comment was, we're just really busting Hood Schifino and Trace Jackson Davis like crazy. Are you going to play them 40 minutes 3 days in a row? the way it's been going, you're never taking Trace Jackson Davis out. I mean, I'd like to get to Sweet 16 one time before, my heart gives out. I mean, it's been a damn long time. Pardon my language.
Yeah, well, Illinois.
You guys have been there a little bit more.
Illinois has been waiting since like 2003. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that's where that came from, Greg, is that we are playing our starters so much that in this situation, man.
And you saw that on full display against Michigan State. They didn't even bring Trace Jackson Davis back in with like 4 or 5 minutes to play when they were down 11. I mean, the game was still in hand where they could have came back, and they didn't even – Mike Woodson just threw in the white flag. Yeah. So I found that to be interesting, and I'm certainly hoping as a Purdue fan that fatigue sets in on Saturday as well, because Purdue hasn't played since Sunday. You guys play on Tuesday, so I'm hoping that helps tip the balance of the scales there too. A couple more bracket things, and then we'll get out of here because it's a late night, and I promised we'd be under an hour, and we have officially right here passed over an hour with my 5-minute intro. I'm sure that didn't help, but when a lot of people get into the gambling and want to pick the Cinderella or the upset picks, when you look at some of the lower seeds, I look at a team like UConn who started the season they could have been number 1 in the country, and then they started to fall off, and now they've kind of leveled back up. Who's a team that maybe is more talented than what their seeding suggests, that some fans that might be underselling them or looking past them, that can be a real threat to go deep in the dance?
I think you mentioned UConn's the one. They were a number 1 seed for a long time and then ran into a bad stretch of basketball, and they're starting to find their way. I think they won big tonight over Providence. And I also think the same thing with Creighton. Creighton lost 6 games in a row, and that Kalkbrenner kid was out, and they lost 3 games without their star center. And then they've come back and started to play a little bit better. Like if they catch a good wave, I think they're talented enough, and they're going to be a 4 or 5. And I think Connecticut is going to be a 4, maybe can move up to a 3. So those are teams that aren't on the top seed lines that I think are extremely, extremely talented. And then you always wonder, like we have a hard time in this meeting tonight when you look at blue bloods at the 8 seed line. Like Duke and Kentucky are on our 8 seed line, which means the second game they're playing a number 1 seed, and I don't know that they're really Duke and Kentucky of old, but they got dudes. And if those dudes show up on a Saturday playing a number 1 team, that's not your typical 8 seed. So I don't know that they're good enough to make a run all the way to the Final Four, but you saw it happen last year with North Carolina. Not a good regular season, but had dudes, and they caught fire, and they make it to the championship game. You saw, I think it was 2 years ago, the COVID year, when they were in the bubble, UCLA was in a play-in game, I believe, and beat Michigan State.
Yep. They
had dudes. So those are the teams you want to identify, are teams that have talent that have really underachieved but slide in the tournament. Those are your, I think, are your most dangerous teams. So I would look at that 8 seed line a little bit. I think the Big Ten struggled, man, in the tournament. I can't pinpoint why. There's a lot of theories out there, but there's a lot of teams that are capable of getting to the Sweet 16, depending on who they get paired with in that first round and that second round. The matchup's got to be pretty good.
Yeah, and one for me is Texas A&M that scares me, because they're projected to be an 8 or 9 seed. But they had 3 really bad losses at the beginning of the year, and they have solidified themselves as the obvious second in the SEC right now and might win the SEC. They've got a game against Bama, I think, to close the season that might be the determination whether they win a piece of the SEC or not. And I've seen in some metrics where in the last month and a half, they're like a top 10 team in the country. They're ugly to watch. It's a bunch of drawing fouls and getting free throws and rebounding, but that sounds like somebody else I know. And, they're a little scary to me if they come in as an 8 or a 9 seed when facing a 1 seed in that second round.
That's a great catch because I like Buzz Williams. I think he does some good things, and I've been waiting for him to turn it around. He almost got in the tournament last year, and I think they'll have a chip on their shoulder if they get in to kind of prove that they belonged last year and they belong this year. But the interesting thing is we talked about them on the 7 seed line tonight, and the 2 losses in November and December are so bad, the quad 4 losses, that our group said we just can't – historically, no one with 2 quad 4 losses has been a top 7 seed. But there's always – precedent always works until it doesn't, right, until this committee changes their mind. And then they go, well, Texas A&M was second in the SEC, so that washes away those 2 quad 4 losses. But you're absolutely right. They're good enough right now to be a 6 seed. Well, if you're
and what if they win? What if they win the SEC and have 2 quad 4 losses?
Yeah, I think then they're off the 8 line. Like if they win a regular season or the SEC plays that game late too on the bracketing week. But if they share a title or win the SEC title, they're off the 8 line. I think they'll forget about those 2 losses and make them at least a 7, if not a 6. But that's a great catch too. And those are those teams you identify, the teams that are talented, the teams that are hot late, that had really bad runs in November and December, that when you look at their whole body of work, puts them at the 6, 7, 8, 9 seed line, but are capable now of playing. Texas A&M is one. I think Kentucky, they won on the road against Florida tonight, and 10 days ago they lost to Georgia. Everyone had them written off, and then they've gotten 3 quad 1 wins in a row. Be careful of Kentucky. I'm not a big fan of theirs, but it's purely from a bracket standpoint.
Well, Alabama's right now, they're on the ropes, 3:41 to play, so still plenty of time, but down 62-59 to South Carolina. It's at South Carolina. So Alabama's certainly going through their own off the
troubles,
court
man.
Troubles right now, to put it mildly. I mean, I don't know if you even want to touch on it, Brian, but how there isn't I don't want to say suspension, but to sit out until there's a resolution or something. You see Purdue players and other players across the country get suspended for much less. And I know this young man didn't pull the trigger, but he offered the gun up according to court documents. Miller, their best player, Brandon Miller, right?
Yeah. NBA guy.
Yeah, you're going to be a lottery, potential
top 5 pick.
Lottery pick. So I don't even know if you even want to touch it, but
I'll talk
an
a little
interesting issue.
It is, and there's a lot of different information coming out. His lawyers sent out a statement explaining their side to it, which was a little different than what the testimony was. Not that anyone was lying. Allegedly, I like this Icy Mike dude.
He's one of our best supporters. He's in the chat every day.
Nope.
Yeah, allegedly with everything.
He's got some good takes, but I like. Let's go back to the IU Purdue rivalry. I think we got a couple of leaders here who care about their universities, and if someone does a little too much drinking or gets a little wild and crazy, I think they take care of it. And sometimes it's a suspension. Sometimes it might be running stairs, something or whatever. Woodson suspended 5 guys for missing curfew at Northwestern. There's probably cases with your program where players have acted inappropriately, but they have been taken care of. And then both of these guys then groom those guys to be better people as well as players.
Sure.
And regardless of the dislike of the opposing team in the rivalry, we have 2 leaders here who I think really care about their universities in the great state of Indiana where basketball is important. How there could not be at least a game or 2 till this just calmed down. Let's say the best situation that Brandon Miller didn't know there was a gun in the car. He just showed up to see his friend, and his friend hid it in the car, then grabbed it. That's the story that the lawyer's coming out with a little bit in that kind of – I'm paraphrasing that. But don't you just say, hey, we've had a mess here, and you were there. That was bad judgment. Take a day or 2 off. Let's get to the bottom of it. There was none of that. I know winning is important. We all want to win. But I think integrity matters too, and it's disappointing from the coaching profession that this is all coming out now and there wasn't anything
and especially
done.
Because
and maybe it shouldn't be a suspension, but it just reeks of bad judgment.
And I agree. And it just seems to me it's like it'd have been one thing if there was just like a gun that was fired. Someone was murdered. A life was lost. So
Mother taken.
Right. So it's serious on a different level that needs to be handled extremely delicately. But, I guess, it's extremely unfortunate for the victims of that family and everything, involved in that. So touchy subject. So we'll just stray away from it. But it's certainly interesting. And now you're seeing, the on the court effects, which are pale in comparison to what happened off the court. But they're in a tough fight with a team that's 10-17 and 3-11 in their conference. So it'll be interesting to see how their rest of the season unfolds. Last question, and then I'm going to cut you loose because somebody brought it up. Xavier Johnson, been injured all year, was a leader on this team last year, was part of the reason why you guys were preseason, top favorites to win the Big Ten, and then he's been hurt all year. I can remember talking to you a few months ago, and you didn't seem very optimistic that he'd come back at all this season. And now you're starting to hear rumblings that he will come back and potentially provide a boost off the bench. Do you have any insight to that or a prediction as far as when we'll see him return or if?
Yeah, I don't think you'll see him Saturday. I've heard that he's back doing basketball activities, but might not be in live scrimmages. That's just a rumor that I've heard. And so until he gets back and can prove, I think, to the doctors and trainers that he can handle whatever stress he's putting on that injured foot, I don't think you'll see him. But it is closer to coming back than not coming back. When it happened, the talk was he was done for the year. And then now recently there's some talk that they're going to bring him back for the Iowa and Michigan games at home, ease him back in at home, and then get him ready for the Big Ten tournament. So I think the optimistic Indiana fan will think that he'll come back next Tuesday, I think, when they play Iowa. If he comes back Saturday, great. I just think he's a guy that's a high motor guy and a high energy guy, and you would be afraid that he might just do too much in that environment at Purdue.
Yep.
And you really need him back because our depth is so bad right now. Our bench players are struggling for whatever reason, and he would add another dimension that would really help in the Big Ten tournament and NCAA tournament if he's healthy, and we want him back at the right time. So that's what I know. I think it'll be Tuesday at home against Iowa, if at all.
Do you think Woodson brings him off the bench when he comes back? Because, arguably, IU's offense has clicked a lot better since he's been out. With JHS kind of running the show a lot more from that standpoint. Do you think he plugs in coming off the bench and kind of being that go-to guy when you sit one of those two down?
I think it. Normally, you don't lose your position for an injury. I mean, he was a big cog in Indiana's offense in that Big Ten tournament and got him into the NCAA tournament. If he's playing Xavier basketball at his best, he needs to go in the starting lineup because I think it makes it better. And it gets Trey Galloway, an energy guy, to come off the bench who also can handle the ball, and it gives Indiana multiple ball handlers on the floor at all times. Once you get past Galloway and Jalen Hood-Schifino, you really don't have an attacker. Well, now you can have two attackers on at all times. So I think health-wise, if he's okayed, you put him back in, it might restrict his minutes. But, boy, you're absolutely right. It is a heavy possibility that it disrupts things. And it's not X being selfish or anything. It's just anytime you get a new player, it takes some time to get back in the groove of things. And so that's a concern. So would it be better to just bring him off a bench and give him 4 or 5 minutes here and 4 or 5 minutes and be that energy guy himself off the bench? I think there's two ways you can go with that. I want my guys, if it happened in my high school program, I want my guys out there. Yeah. I'll take the risk of not having it mesh to have the better players out there in the starting lineup,
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you run the risk of trying to have Xavier Johnson be a role player off the bench and that's not something he's comfortable doing, and then trying to maybe do too much in limited minutes. But it'll be an interesting dynamic to see how Mike Woodson plays that. All tied up 66 apiece with 35 seconds on the clock here. Pretty tough call on South Carolina.
Talking about officiating, South Carolina had a straight up clean block, didn't even touch the dude, and they called a foul.
Yeah, he hit one.
What station's that on?
It's on ESPN2, and the clock is running at 18 seconds. South Carolina pulls up. And he
Bucket.
buried the shot. 14 seconds to go. I don't even know if I'm allowed to technically read this stuff live, but yeah, 14 seconds ago, South Carolina just nailed a jumper, at the top of the key to make it 68-66.
So bracketology, Brian, if Bama loses to this team, can they survive and still be a 1 seed?
The quick answer before I go to my spreadsheet to look at all the numbers, the quick answer is yes. Depending on what Texas and all of those do, it doesn't help. I mean, I believe this is on the road. I don't know what South Carolina's net
It can't
is.
be high. They're 10-17.
It can't be high, so it's got to be. It's either it's more likely a 3 seed. Possibly. So a loss in quad 3 is not like automatically drops you, but I think they lost to Tennessee last week. Now you lose to South Carolina. You have, and I don't know if the committee takes into effect some of the turmoil they're in either. They're 243. South Carolina's 243 in the net. So that's a 4.
That's a quad 4, yep.
Nope. Yeah. Here's the thing that stinks about the cutoffs. The cutoff is 241. So South Carolina winning this probably puts them
jump into a quad 3.
Jump into a quad 3 loss. Then looking, we had Alabama as the 2 overall seed after tonight's meeting. And you put a quad 3 loss in. Houston has a quad 3 loss. Yeah, I think Alabama stays, but it might reorder. It might be good for your Boilers. Alabama might go down to the last 1 seed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes up. Hoping maybe we can get you on one more time before the end of the year, but I understand you guys are busy over there doing your thing at Assembly Call and of course, your work with Delphi Bracketology. You guys stream on Indiana sports coverage. We love the guys at ISC Purdue, and you guys are doing great work. So as Alabama drives to the rim and ties the game with 4 seconds to go, and now we're going to have a last-second shot for 3 to win, and it's an air ball. We are heading to overtime for South Carolina and Alabama. So we'll have to wait and see how that one wraps up, but I'm going to let you go to bed, Brian, as I give my patented Midwestern goodbye that Craig will have to sit through, but I won't make you sit through it. So,
all righty. Thanks fellas. Enjoy the game Saturday. I wish you nothing but the best. The rivalry is a solid rivalry. You have great atmosphere there and a great program. I hope you lose, but I don't know that you will. But thanks for having me on and this horrible background for you guys. I hope I've been fair in my analysis. You guys do good work as well. When you bring stuff to your fans, that's good, regardless of the rivalry. I know that happens with us at Assembly Call. You get to follow the listeners like Icy Mike. Like I get to know Icy Mike now, right? That's a good thing. What you guys do is great in an era of content creation. And Greg, you know how much I appreciate you with your coverage of the Bears and all of that stuff. So just keep grinding and doing great things. And then after this weekend, we can be back as friends. But until then,
yeah. Are you going to be
a whiny ass?
Are you going to be at the game on Saturday?
Yes, I do have credentials for Saturday.
All right, sweet. Well, we'll see you there. And thank you. If we don't bring you back on, I always appreciate your support with us and with what I'm trying to do. So you're certainly somebody I look up to in a big way. So, but I'll save all the sappy shit for your show tomorrow on Assembly Call. I'm going to hop on there and jump in the Lions Den with you guys.
And I can say this on the show tomorrow too. Like I just need to drive up and go out to dinner with you and your wife and bring my wife up and just, chop it up over dinner some night.
Yeah, you got to meet the better half. It'll put things more into focus.
Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, have a good night.
Yep.
We'll see you.
Well, yep.
Thanks, Brian.
That is Brian Tonsoni from Assembly Call and Delphi Bracketology. As overtime is kicking off here for South Carolina and Alabama. I think obviously you'd want to see South Carolina win that in regulation, not looking as good, but you just never know. We got 5 minutes to go, and hell, I'm sure through this entire
they got
Midwest.
Screwed.
Yeah, they got screwed on that call. They could have gotten a stop at the end to win it, and they couldn't quite do that either. So before we go, I do want to give a shout out to Mad Mushroom. Somebody in the chat called it. You got to absolutely make sure you hit up Mad Mushroom. Use the coupon code BITS for 15% off any order. Go get the best cheese sticks in the game, the best pizza in the game. Use our coupon code BITS for Boilers in the Stands, and you will get 15% off any order you make. Staple of West Lafayette, Mad Mushroom. Appreciate their support here on Boilers in the Stands. So that about wraps things up. Of course, I said we were going to keep it under an hour. That is literally impossible for me to do. So do you want to give, for those of you that are still hanging out in the chat, please hit that like button, especially those of you that are on the YouTube channel. We're getting so close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're like 10 away. So please tell your sister, tell your friend, whoever, subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook because we're close to 1,000 there. But we really appreciate that support in that way. And then of course, Craig mentioned that we're going to have a meetup for, we're going to start promoting this on social media here over the next couple of days, at, Craig's, stomping grounds over at Brokerage Brewing Company in West Lafayette before the Purdue IU game on Saturday. So Craig, maybe give him a little more clarity on kind of what the game plan is with that, because we kind of just threw it together in the last couple hours with Habitual Boiler.
Yeah, I mean, I just still ironing out a couple of details, but I think we were looking at 4 to 6. I did go ahead and talk to Lorenzo at Brokerage and make sure we had that room solidified for that day. Max capacity of 50. So if we get over 50 people that want to hang out and meet Greg Braggs and get his autograph, we're going to have to book a second room. We can do that. We can book the overflow room for the 10 or 12 people that want to talk to me and Habitual Boiler while Greg gets all of his fandom over there. But nonetheless, we will have a space to just kind of meet and hang out there. Brokerage Brewing Company, for me, that's my spot in terms of really, really good craft beer in the Lafayette, West Lafayette area. Also a 5-minute shot to Mackey from there. So really easy access to the game. We were thinking about wrapping it up.
And you don't have to fight the lines that are at some of the other staples of pre-games for Purdue Boilermakers.
Well, there's only one staple, and that's Harry's. Like, unfortunately, West Lafayette, Purdue in general, does not have a great campus bar scene anymore. They just don't. So you basically got Harry's. So outside of that, everybody else is kind of fighting for other people to come in. So you're not getting into Harry's Saturday unless you get there at 10 a.m. So hit up Brokerage with us.
Yeah, and maybe we'll order some Mad Mushroom, a couple pizzas,
it's bring your own food there now.
Right.
They don't have a kitchen anymore, so we could order some Mad Mushy for everybody.
And I'll do that. So anybody that's watching right now that's tuned in, we'll have a couple pizzas, try to gauge how many people are actually coming over the next couple days, and we'll try to give you some food and we'll hang out and enjoy the day before we make our trek over to Mackey Arena. I'm really hoping that my guy here, Adam Geis, comes so he can help give me advice on how to ask better questions. Because he's right. I don't ask great questions. I ramble. Sometimes when I ask a question, it takes me like 15 minutes to ask it. So Adam, if you've got some pointers and advice, I am all ears, because asking a question for me or finishing a show for me are two of the hardest things ever. So I can take a critical eye. I hope you're still tuned in, Adam, but if not, that's okay. But he'll be the first person I sign an autograph for, Craig. And then I see Mike. He was going to come, but then all my Hoosier apologistness of tonight and throwing flowers at Brian's feet.
It was getting a little shaky, Greg. Even I was getting nervous that we were just getting a little bit too much IU content there for my life. You pitched this to me as a back and forth, and for like a 20-minute segment, there was no fourth. There was only back. So,
yeah, well, my head's just spinning. So, I don't know where it's going, and it's like, you never know what I'm going to bring up. That's why I'm, when your internet went out, I panicked. I was like, well, if he can't come on, I'm screwed.
No, I don't know. I don't know what happened because I've been plugged in the entire night. So I'm not on Wi-Fi. I'm actually plugged in. So it's rural internet, man. We need to fix rural internet, America.
Yeah.
Gosh dang it.
Yeah. So we'll see how things go. But yeah, stay on the lookout for our, some of our promotion for the meetup on Saturday. Tomorrow, for those of you that still tuned in, tomorrow night, Joe and I will be talking to Walter Jordan, an all-time Purdue great who just got inducted into the Purdue Hall of Fame here just over last weekend. He was at the game on Sunday. We've been in talks with him for the last month or so to hop on the show. And tomorrow night's going to be that night. Unfortunately, Craig has to work, so he won't be able to join us. But I hope everyone that's tuned in can join and hang out with us while we talk to Walter Jordan about, his playing days and his perspective on this team. As South Carolina just tied it back up 74 all. They were down 74-70 with under 50 seconds to go. So that's, of course, getting really interesting. But we're going to
74-72. They were down. There's no 4-point shot in college basketball.
I'm telling you, they were down 74-70 and just came back. Okay. That's what I was saying.
Well, now they're up 76-70.
I see the numbers.
They're losing.
76-74, under 30
Bama.
seconds to play. Timeout. Carolina, they're down 2. So we'll see.
Friggin' refs.
All right. We're going to bed. Bye-bye, Facebook user. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you to Brian Tonsoni of Assembly Call and Delphi Bracketology for coming on. As always, he brings great insight, and he's a really good dude. So appreciate his support. Thank you to everyone that tuned into the chat. Appreciate you guys. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers. Please hit that like button, subscribe. Shout out one more time to Fanbags Cornhole and Mad Mushroom. Appreciate their support and sponsorship to this show. We'll be back tomorrow night talking to Walter Jordan, talking about his career, and talking a little more Boilermakers basketball. Never gets old here. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon. And always Boiler up.
Good job.